Nobody in the tower could explain the blip. It appeared on the radar screen at 4:12 hours Pacific Standard Time, roughly 60 nautical miles southwest of the USS Nimitz carrier strike group. A single contact, slow, high, drifting inbound on a heading that made no tactical sense. It wasn't squawking IFF. It wasn't answering guard frequency. It wasn't in any filed flight plan, any diplomatic corridor, any scheduled exercise window. The contact simply existed, the way unexplained things sometimes do in the dark over the Pacific, resolving itself from noise into intention without warning or apology. Commander Hale Braddock, senior air controller aboard the Nimitz, had been at his scope for 3 hours when the blip materialized. He was not a man given to alarm. He worked the Gulf twice, had vectored aircraft through sandstorms and SAM envelopes in the particular madness of night carrier operations, but something about the contact's behavior unsettled him in a way he couldn't quite name. It moved with purpose, not aggressive, not erratic. Just purposeful, the way a surgeon's hand moves, or a hawk before it commits to the stoop. "No joy on guard," said the petty officer beside him, pulling the headset away from one ear. "Nothing on secondary. Contact is clean on emissions, no radar, no targeting lock. Whatever it is, it's not painting us." Braddock chewed the inside of his cheek. "Get me 2 Raptors." The alert 5 birds were airborne inside 7 minutes. Captain Dex Morrow and his wingman, call sign Parrish, lit their afterburners and clawed into a sky that was black and absolute. Nothing between them and the contact but 100,000 feet of cold Pacific air, and whatever story it was carrying. Morrow was 29 years old, third-generation Navy, and he had never once in his career been told to intercept something the tower couldn't identify or explain. His mouth tasted like adrenaline and old coffee. The contact came onto his radar scope at 40 miles. He watched it. It was not a fighter. The return was too wide, too soft, something bigger, something old, moving at airspeeds that belonged to a different era entirely. He called it in. "TOPWATCH Raptor 1, contact is subsonic, estimated speed 290 knots, altitude flight level 230, no observed maneuver, proceeding to visual." The carrier tower was silent for a moment. Then Braddock's voice came back, measured and careful. "Copy Raptor 1, establish contact. Do not, I say again, do not illuminate unless directed." Morrow acknowledged and pushed his throttle forward. Beside him in the dark, Parrish held formation with the automatic steadiness of a man who had learned that questions could wait, that the sky answered in its own time. They were closing at a combined rate of nearly 800 knots. In less than 3 minutes, they would have eyes on whatever it was that had appeared from nowhere and was now calmly, unhurriedly coming home. Neither of them was ready for what they found. The aircraft resolved from darkness the way old photographs resolve from developer fluid, gradually, incompletely, then all at once with a shock of recognition that made the breath catch. It was an A6E intruder. Morrow's first instinct was professional denial. The airframe had been retired from Navy service in 1997. There were none flying, not in active inventory, not in reserve, not in any exercise posture that remotely involved a carrier strike group operating in the Pacific in the 3rd decade of the 21st century. The type existed now only in museums, in grainy cockpit footage on documentary channels, in the memories of men old enough to have launched from wooden deck carriers that smelled of jet exhaust and salt and something harder to name. And yet here one was, 230 feet above the Pacific, navigation lights burning amber-white red in the ancient rhythm, moving through the dark with a calm that bordered on contempt for the 2 fifth-generation fighters now tucked off its wingtips. Morrow keyed his radio, aware that his voice needed to carry steadiness it didn't entirely feel. "TOPWATCH, Raptor 1, visual on contact. You are not going to believe this." He described it, every detail, the hump fuselage, the twin engines buried in the wing roots, the refueling probe, the intake geometry, the faded tactical gray that had not been regulation since before Morrow was in middle school. He described the tail number, which he read twice because he didn't trust his eyes the first time. And he described the single feature that stopped him mid-sentence and left a silence on the frequency that nobody rushed to fill. The aircraft's tail was marked with a squadron insignia that had been officially decommissioned. Below it, in letters too small to read at distance but just visible enough to confirm they were there, was a name. Not a unit name, a personal name. The kind painted on aircraft only when the pilot in question had earned the right to wear the airplane the way other people wear rank. The name read Vyasalavy. In the Nimitz Tower, Braddock heard Morrow's description go quiet mid-sentence and waited. Around him, the watch staff had gone very still. One of the younger petty officers had pulled out her phone and was already searching, already cross-referencing, already coming up with the same result that all searches on that name eventually produced. A wall of declassified citations, redacted incident reports, and a photograph taken in 1990, one of a woman standing in front of an A6E on a carrier deck, helmet under her arm, eyes on something beyond the camera, expression unreadable. Lieutenant Commander Myra Vasiliev, call sign VOLKOV. Braddock set the coffee cup down very slowly. Raptor 1, he said, does the contact appear to have a pilot? A pause, then Morrow's voice, stripped of performance for the first time all night. Affirm, TOPWATCH, single occupant, front seat, there, she's looking right at us. The story of Myra Vasiliev did not begin with the war. It began with the silence before it, the specific silence of a briefing room in 1988 where she was the only woman in a flight suit and the only junior officer who had already logged more low-level night hours than two of the instructors running the syllabus. She knew this not because anyone told her, but because she had read the logbooks in the squadron's admin office when nobody was watching, had done the arithmetic, and had folded the information away in the same interior place where she stored everything that would eventually become useful. Her father had been a Soviet naval aviator who defected in 1973, flew crop dusters in Oregon for 3 years to stay alive, and eventually naturalized, married a woman from Spokane whose family had come from Ukraine before the First World War, and produced a daughter who learned English and Russian simultaneously, and who, by the age of 8, could identify any aircraft in Jane's All the World's Aircraft by silhouette alone. He never pushed her toward aviation. He simply never told her it was unavailable to her, which turned out to be a more powerful education than any deliberate instruction. She applied to naval aviation in 1983. She was rejected. She applied again in 1984 with a letter of recommendation from a retired rear admiral who had watched her fly a Cessna 172 through conditions that had grounded every other student at the flight school. She was accepted provisionally with a notation in her file that certain billets would remain closed to her based on current policy. She read the notation, acknowledged it, and reported to Pensacola. She was 22 years old, and she flew like someone who had been told the sky was not for her and had decided, privately and without drama, to go up anyway. The call sign VOLKOV came later, from an instructor who had intended it as mockery. Wolf, he said, because she hunted alone and didn't socialize at the O Club and had a habit of filing dissenting post-flight reports when the debrief didn't match what she'd observed in the air. She took the call sign without comment and made it hers in the way that only people with absolute internal security can take something offered as insult and wear it as identity. Within 6 months, the mockery had calcified into respect. Within a year, no one